One of the advantages of being a volunteer researcher at the McKinley Presidential Library and Museum is that I learn about fascinating aspects of our rich Stark County history. We recently received a request from a person who emailed our Ramsayer Research Library to identify a photograph of President William McKinley giving a speech from the back of a train. He told us this photograph could have been taken by his great-great-grandfather while attending Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, or in his hometown of Lancaster, Wisconsin, between 1896 and 1900. I set out to find an answer. I tried to trace some campaign stops in either 1896 or 1900 that McKinley may have made by train. In the course of reviewing Stark County historian Edward T. Heald's unpublished and unfinished McKinley biography, which he did in 1967, regarding possible train stops for McKinley during his presidential years, I had no luck, though, in finding a connection between McKinley and Evanston, Illinois, or Lancaster, Wisconsin. So as it happens frequently in the research business, you don't always get what you want, as the song goes. Sometimes, though, you find other completely unrelated historical tidbits poking their little heads out of their hiding places, which leads me to Cannon Day. While I couldn't help the great-great-grandchild with the McKinley picture, I did uncover some fascinating facts about a big celebration that happened in Canton on July 4th, 1900. President McKinley returned to Canton with Ida, the First Lady from Washington, D.C., after being successfully renominated in June in Philadelphia at the Republican National Convention. According to our historian Edward T. Heald's unpublished manuscripts, for which the Canton Repository is a major source, which tells the story of McKinley's 1900 presidential campaign. President McKinley would stay at his North Market house most of the summer, now the location of the Stark County District Library. Canton was a very active city at that time, as McKinley received many visiting dignitaries and delegations from all over the country. One of the events during this late June, early July period would be the dedication by McKinley on July 4th of a newly procured Spanish-American War souvenir for the city of Canton, a brass cannon that was captured at Santiago Harbor, Cuba. Canton's cannon was made possible with the help of Canton native William R. Day, U.S. Secretary of State during the Spanish-American War, and later named a Supreme Court justice by President Theodore Roosevelt. This Spanish cannon was cast in France in 1748 by King Louis XV, and at some point made its way to Spanish-owned Cuba. This cannon stood in the Estrella Battery on the east side of Santiago Harbor. Dedication of the cannon that July 4th in Canton occurred on the lawn of the southwest corner of the old Canton City Hall building on South Cleveland Avenue, where the present City Hall now stands. William R. McKinley and other dignitaries from Washington, D.C. gave speeches that day on the lawn of then the former courthouse. There was a huge parade that day represented by recent Spanish-American War veterans, Civil War veterans, and many workers from various companies throughout the state. The people of Canton were treated to a daytime fireworks display at the parade on Public Square, and fireworks later that night were displayed from an area at the intersection of Shoppe Avenue and West Tusk Street. On July 6, 1900, thousands of people descended on the McKinley home and were treated to rousing speeches by President William McKinley and soon-to-be Vice President, Governor of New York, Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt had just arrived in Canton that day after returning from a vacation in Arizona with his Rough Riders. Cannons situated on Duber Heights, near the old Duber-Hampton Watchworks, boomed their salutes upon arrival by train of Roosevelt. Factory whistles were also heard throughout the city, proclaiming TR's arrival. The brass cannon, along with another mortar and metal piece of the conning tower from the battleship Maine that was sunk in the Havana, Cuba harbor, all stood on the grounds of the old City Hall until 1938. These items were then moved to Canton City's Waterworks Park, out on West Tusk. These relics of the Spanish-American War were finally moved to the recently erected Stark County Veterans Memorial at Westbrook Park around the year 2000. So, Such is the day in the life of a historical researcher. Always challenging, frequently frustrating, but always a treasure hunt. Send us your questions. Tom Haas, Librarian Volunteer.